Okay, so welcome to INSE 6150 Security Evaluation Methodologies. For a bunch of you, it's probably your first term here at Concordia, so welcome as well to Montreal and to Concordia. So my name's Jeremy. I'll be the instructor for this course. You can call me Jeremy. I'm not that much older than you. But if that makes you uncomfortable, you can call me Professor Clark as well. And what we'll do today is we'll go through the course outline, and then we will start into the course material as well. I noticed on the calendar for me that this was scheduled to end at 5:30. It actually ends at 5:15. Not that it makes much difference, but anyways. Okay, so let's start with the course website. So the course website is on Moodle, so you should have access to it. If you don't, I don't know exactly what you do. You can ask IITS, or you can email graduate@cic.concordia.ca or whatever. I'm sure you got instructions on how to access it. If you can't find it, you can always find it from my website. So if you just Google me, I should come up. And from my website, if you click courses, we're at the top link. And if you click on that, then it will take you straight into that course on Moodle. Okay, so the course outline is here. So I'll go through the course outline, and then I'll talk about other stuff, I guess, after that. Okay, so we're all here, so that's good. I will have office hours. So office hours are a time for you to ask any questions. It might pertain to the material of the course or the assignments or whatever the case may be. The office hours will be virtual, okay? So they won't be in person. So it will be just Zoom. The link is there. The link is on Moodle as well. And they'll be Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, 14 hours. So what you'll do is if you have a question for me, first off, it's completely optional, so you don't have to come. It's just if you have questions. It's not for everyone. It's like a one-on-one meeting. So when you click on Zoom, you'll go into a waiting room, and then I'll take students in one at a time. If you're sitting in the waiting room, you can't see how many other students are there, I don't think. Unfortunately, it would be better if Zoom showed you that. So anyways, just be patient. Eventually, I will get to you, and then you can ask the questions. You don't have to turn your video on or anything like that. It can just be audio, and yeah, I'll help you out. By 2:15, if no students show up, unfortunately, like most weeks, like no one comes. I won't stay online. I'm not going to stay online forever, right? So I'll stay online for 15 minutes, and if there's students, I'll stay on as long as it takes to go through all the students. And if there's no one there by 2:15, I'll leave. That said, if you log in at 2:20 and you really want to talk to me and I'm not there, then just shoot me an email, and I can either jump back on Zoom if I see it right away or things like that. You can also ask me questions over email, so you don't have to come to office hours specifically if you don't want to. So those are all fine options. Questions about office hours? Okay. So the course itself is, you're probably in the security program here at Concordia. Actually, just show of hands, how many of you are in the MEng, so this is the course-based master's security stream, ISS? So I think that's almost everyone. Who's not in that program? Okay, all right. So the other options is you could be doing a thesis-based master's in security. Sometimes students come from quality, which is the other part of CIISE, and then sometimes you get students from CS or software engineering or somewhere else. So since there's no one from quality, I'll just say for the sake of the recording that if you are in quality, you can take this course, it's fine. I've had quality students before, but you might have to do a bit of background reading. So the concepts are going to be a little different than what you're used to. If you're in the security stream, it should be no problem. And I try and make the course as self-contained as possible. So I'm not assuming that you're coming in with lots of experience in security, in math, in crypto, in programming, anything like that. The textbooks, there's no required textbook for the course. There are some textbooks that I recommend. So when I did the lectures, I pulled them from different textbooks. So for example, today we're going to talk about something called Stride. That's from a textbook called Threat Modeling. And so if you wanted more information about Stride, you could look at it. So it's always under additional materials for the particular lecture. So if you wanted to read this book, you could. I think you can get it through the library for free. I'm not sure. But when it comes time for exams and that type of thing, I'm not going to ask you about stuff that's in the book, okay? I'm only going to ask you about things that we covered in the lecture. So that's things in the lecture notes, but it also includes things that I say that I don't explicitly write down. The lectures will consist of me writing down notes, so there's no slides. I find that this is a little easier. It forces me to go slower so that you get the concepts. And I will give you a copy of the notes as well. So I'll circle back to that issue, but let me just go through the course outline and then we'll talk about that. So additional resources will be posted on Moodle. You're free to look at them, especially if you aren't getting the concept from the class, then hearing someone else explain it or reading a chapter instead of like a 1 hour lecture might help you with the concept. And then my lecture notes will also be posted on Moodle. So the course evaluation is very simple. So we'll have an exam at the end of the term. It's worth 50%. There's no midterm, so it's just one final. You'll have a project, which I'll talk about next. That's worth 30% of your mark. And then there'll be 2 assignments. I've penciled in the dates of the assignments, but these aren't final. I haven't finalized the assignments yet, so you can't see this. It's not visible yet, but somewhere in and around October 12th, around that week, assignment 1 will be due, and then sometime, actually that didn't get updated from last year. The second assignment will be due like around November, mid-November. So that's it. The final exam I'll talk about more. You'll have lots of questions, I'm sure, the lecture before, or the 2 lectures before the final, but it will consist mostly of short answer and multiple choice. And yeah, it will cover the material of the course. Okay, the outline is here. I'll let you look at it yourself. And the project I'll talk about. Here's some lists for resources. So if you ever need it, if you need health services or mental health, if you have mental health issues, anything like that, security, there's contact information here for all of that. This is something I'll talk about. Probably I'll talk about it quickly with the project, but I'll reiterate it a few times. So plagiarism is a major concern at Concordia, and they take it very seriously. Generally, if a student plagiarizes, there'll be some punishment for the first occurrence, and then the second occurrence, the default punishment is expulsion from the university. And so it's very, very serious. Plagiarism is basically presenting someone else's work as if it's your own. So the most common example would be if you copied and pasted text from somewhere else, say in the project's like the most logical place where it would happen, and you present it as if you wrote that text yourself, okay? So that's considered plagiarism. That said, you can use other resources, okay? But what you have to do is you have to explain it in your own words. Another form of plagiarism that's a little lighter, and students sometimes do it not realizing it's plagiarism, is let's say I take text and I copy and paste it, but then I grammatically change it. Like I change a couple of the words, or maybe I rearrange the sentence, but the logic of the text is exactly the same, right? The flow of the text, the concepts that are being talked about are exactly the same. I'm just making kind of trivial changes to the English language presentation of it. That is still plagiarism as well, okay? So my recommendation is if you're going to use another text, don't copy and paste it, don't have it even open, just sort of read it until you understand it, close it, and then explain in your own words what it said. And then you have to cite where the idea came from. So you might say, well, there was this paper and they looked at this issue, and here's my summary of it, okay? And you can be very informal in your project. Like you can say, I read this paper and this is my interpretation of it. Like you can use words like that. You don't have to write in a super formal style. It can be a kind of conversational style, okay? The other form of academic misconduct is cheating on exams. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. To try and combat that, my exams are open book. So you're allowed to bring, not going to let you bring everything in because then students are ruffling through papers and it's very like disorganized. But what I'll do is I'll let you bring one piece of paper where you can write anything that you want to. So anything that you want to memorize, you can write on a piece of paper. You can bring that piece of paper in the exam, and you can have it as a reference sheet to look at during the exam. So the exams won't be based on memorizing information at all. Anything that you would memorize, you can just put on the page itself. The exam questions will be more about the concepts. I try and make them so you can't Google the answer because it's more of a conceptual question. So even if people go to the bathroom and look at their phone or whatever, it shouldn't help you. The main kind of offense that remains is that you're looking off of someone else's sheet when you're answering it. And so that's disallowed, and there's severe punishments for it, and we'll have invigilators and things like that. So anyways, that's the code of conduct. This is some like boilerplate text that they put in. It's actually for the bachelor's program, but it's probably relevant for master's programs as well. I'll let you read that on your own time. Okay, any questions about any of this? Yeah.
Is there an exact date for final?
Okay, good question. So the final exams are not chosen by me. So I don't choose the date. The university chooses it, and they tell me what it is. I don't have the date yet. It usually, they start scheduling it like October, November, I think. So I forget exactly. I actually tried to look up when they did it last year, but I couldn't find it. So the dates themselves, like the window, I put into the Courseps website. So exams begin on the 9th and they end on the 22nd. So your final exam could technically be anywhere in between those two dates. I don't pick it. So the university is going to pick it. And yeah, I said usually by November. It might be a little earlier. I can't remember exactly when they post it. So what I recommend is if you're going to be traveling over the break, don't start booking tickets until you know the final exam dates. They can't be moved, and travel is not a valid excuse for deferring your exam. If you're sick or something, there's some medical reason or something like that, you can defer an exam. But for travel reasons, they won't rearrange the date of the exam or anything like that. And when it is posted, it will be posted on this website. So this website we'll just have like the summer exams or whatever. So eventually they'll update it with the fall term exams. But like I say, don't hold your breath. It's going to be like a month or two before they post it. Yes.
What's the complexity of the course?
So what I did, like I say, everything is sort of self-contained, right? So you shouldn't have to have strong prerequisites coming into the course. If you have any sort of technical undergrad, like engineering, computer science, anything like that, you should be fine. If you're coming from business or some other area, you still should be able to keep up, but you might have to do more background reading. And it's very focused on concepts, so like conceptual level of security. And I'm trying to get you to think from a security perspective. That's the main objective of the course. And I'm also trying to pick up a lot of topics that aren't normally covered in the other core courses. So I would say the other core courses, so that would be like cryptography 6110, crypto protocols 6120, operating systems and network security 30 and 40. They're more technical in nature. This one sort of tries to pick up the things that aren't covered but are still important for security. So I would say that and there are some aspects where it does get a little deep into details, and then I just sort of gloss over it. So I'm not assuming, for example, if we talk about crypto protocols, I'm not going to assume that you've taken a cryptography course. And so, yeah. Now, another way to assess that for yourself is what I did is I actually left the lecture notes from last year in the course website because they were sitting there anyway. I just copied everything over. And so they all say archive. So if you actually want to look ahead and see what's covered, you can do it. Okay, so if you want to see, what we're talking about in whatever lecture 4, the notes are there. And and so I'll also say that this is how the notes appear. So the notes are just, they're handwritten notes. You'll get a copy of the PDF. I'm also recording the audio and the video, and so I'll post that as well. By video, I mean like a screen capture, not a video of me. And so you'll get a copy of that as well on the course website. So you can, if you miss a lecture or something like that, or you're away, you can catch up just by watching the video and looking at the notes.
It would be the same with the pre-recorded video?
Sorry, will the material be the same? Kind of roughly. I mean, I'm going to say different things, but it's the same content. So I might change things a little bit, but more or less it would be the same. So if you actually just did the whole course based on last term's recordings, you probably would do fine on the final exam. What I say, this year might be, like I say, it might be a little bit different, but not in any like really meaningful way. And there is one lecture that I'm going to change a little bit, and so there's some new results in that area, so I'm going to update that lecture. But yeah, I'd say like 95% of it's the same as last year. Yeah.
Will you be discussing the project details?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I'll do that. Okay, so let's talk about the project. So the project description is available. I may change the time that it's due because we have an earlier time slot. So I'll make it after class or something like that. But other than that, it's fine. Okay, so the project will be a written report. The topic of the project is your choice. Okay, so you can choose anything. It has to be relevant to security. Obviously, it's a security course, but it also has to be relevant to methodologies. So methodologies is what we're teaching. And so methodology at a high level is how do you know that something's secure, right? So I can say, we have passwords or whatever, but like how do you know that a password's secure? Or like under what conditions is it secure? Under what conditions does it break? What assumptions are you making? That type of thing. So that's the methodology of security. So as long as your project picks up on that, so it might be that you apply one of the methodologies either from class or some other methodology that you learn about in your own reading, you apply it to something, right? You're like, I want to look at, I don't know, smart homes or something, and I'm going to apply this methodology to it. Okay, so that you can do that type of project. You could do a project where you propose a methodology or you look at the methodologies themselves, right? Is this a good methodology? Is it not good? Some methodologies are automated. Like, for example, if you want to look at source code and know whether there's security bugs, you might use an automated tool to do it. Others, a lot of what we concentrate on in this course is manual, sort of humans looking at things, just following a kind of methodology. Okay. And so as long as there's that element of security evaluation, it's fine. And yeah.
Is this an individual project?
Okay, so the projects may be individual or you can work up to groups of 4 people. So you can be 1, 2, 3, or 4. The bigger your group is, the more I expect from the project, so keep that in mind. So if one person does a project and you put 3 names on it at the end, then you might not expect a great mark on the project, okay? All of this is negotiable too. Like if you have 5 people and you really want to do a project or whatever, you can come talk to me and I might, if you make a case and it's a good case, then that's fine. But yeah. So, and so I take into account, so don't feel that you have to form a group. Like a lot of you might not know anyone else in the class or things like that. Like good projects come from individuals, and I've had good projects come from groups. Okay, so I consider whether you're 1 person, 2 people, 3 people when I mark it. And so you're not disadvantaged by either working alone, or you're not going to be disadvantaged working in a large group either, as long as the amount of work sort of is matches the amount of people. The report is just written, and so like no code or anything like that. You can have diagrams and figures, whatever you need to get across the point. If you want to do some programming is not a requirement of this, but if you did do some implementation, normally what you do is you don't provide the code. You might provide a link to GitHub or something like that, but you describe what it is. Okay, so this is what I did. This is, I don't know how many lines of code it is. This is how fast it runs, whatever. Like you describe it. And instead of code itself. Okay, so the report itself, it has a page limit of 8, and once again negotiable. So if you really want 9 or 10, just ask me. It's probably not a problem, but I have to put a limit on it because in my mind, I mean, this room's pretty full, but I think there's probably 30 or more people that aren't here. And if you all submit something with 8 pages, you know, I end up with 500 pages that I have to read, and I have a week to read them or whatever. So it's like reading a textbook in a week. So that's why there's going to be a page limit on it. That's also a maximum. So if you want to write a 6-page paper or something like that, that's fine. So no more than 8 pages. I don't care what template you use, as long as it's reasonable, then it's fine. You can just use the default in Word, or if you want to make it look like an academic paper, academic papers have template files. You can download them, so you could write it in, for example, the IEEE format. That's something that's used by engineers a lot, but that's not necessary. You can just use Word's default, or if you use LaTeX, you can use the LaTeX default. You don't need a cover page either. I mean, there's no marks if you have one, if deducted if you have one or whatever, but you can just have the title. Make sure that you have all the students and all the student IDs on it. That's sort of obvious at the top of the first page, and that's fine. And then plagiarism is the other thing. So there is a website here. I talked a bit about it, but read through the website as well and make sure you understand it. And if you have questions about it, ask me. The main trick is you want to cite a lot. So if you're getting ideas from somewhere else, you can cite it. And it really doesn't matter if every sentence of your final report has a citation. Okay, in fact, that's good. There's some academics write papers like that, like where, you know, they're systemizing knowledge from lots of different papers, and they're telling you exactly where every idea is coming from. And so that's like very normal in academia. Okay, so you can't cite too much. Your citations as well, like that, the format thing applies to that. I don't care. As long as I can look at the citation and figure out what you're citing, I can Google it or something like that. It doesn't matter what format it's in, you know, title, author, whatever. So just anything that's reasonable. Have the title, have the author's name, have where it appeared, if it's an academic paper, like the name of the conference or journal or whatever, and a year. That's typically the 4 things that you would have, and everything else, like the volume and the city that the conference was in and all that stuff, like doesn't matter at all. Okay, so let's talk about the topic of the paper itself. So you can write a paper where, okay, let me do this sort of out of order. Okay, I'll start with point 7. Okay, so what I would encourage you to do that works well in past years, but it's not a strict requirement, you don't have to do it, is think of a question. Okay, so your report, the title of your report should be a question about security. Like, what's the security of XYZ, or how does the security of ABC compare to XYZ, or something like that, okay? So think of it as a question, and then everything that you need to answer the question should be in your report. So if I need to understand the background of how ABC works, then you're going to have to include it. Do you have to include all the details of how ABC works? No, you're telling me about the security of it, so tell me as much detail as I need to understand the security of it. So whatever you're going to say about the security of it, I need that details, but I don't need other details that aren't relevant to it. So by phrasing it as a question, it becomes easier to think about, okay, do I include this or don't I include this, or how much background do I need? All of those kinds of questions sort of take care of themselves, right? So I want it to be self-contained, and that's it. And you can have a series of questions too. So maybe you're like, okay, this is going to answer these 3 questions. So it's not so much a title, it's in the introduction or something like that. That's fine. But thinking like sort of question, answer, that's will kind of put you on the right track to choosing a particular topic. You can write papers that use other academic papers. Okay, or non-academic papers as well. So academic papers are papers that are published. Generally, they tend to be at a higher, there's a certain quality to an academic paper that you wouldn't necessarily get in, say, a blog post, even if it's a technical blog post, okay? Academic papers are expected to be in a particular format. They're peer-reviewed, which can mean a little or a lot, it depends. And unfortunately, there's also lots of places to publish papers, and some places aren't so good. They basically publish anything, and other places are super competitive, and unless your paper is like a really good novel idea and written perfectly, it's never going to get in. So I'll try and help you try and find high quality papers in my advice a little bit later. But anyways, you can draw on academic papers. Now, what you're doing is you're drawing on them because they're helping you answer the question that you want to answer. Okay? So in other words, you're taking the knowledge out of the paper and you're systemizing it into your own paper, which is answering the question, okay? What you're not doing is you're not surveying that. So a survey would be, give me a summary of this paper. Like I read 4 papers, paper 1 said this, paper 2 said this, paper 3 said this, paper 4 said that, okay? That's a survey. I don't want a survey, okay? What I want is I want a paper that's on a particular subject, and if you're using papers 1, 2, 3, and 4 to answer your security question or to write the content of your paper, then that's fine. Then they go into the paper in the right place such that they help you answer the question, okay? So you're systemizing, you're pulling the information from the papers. You're not just summarizing them for the sake of summarizing them, okay? So some students will be like, oh, we have 3 people, so each of us take a paper and then, you know, we'll each write about our 3 papers. So I don't want that type of thing, okay? Another thing with systemization is that papers are also written in a particular order. So author might write a paper 1 year, 2 years later a paper comes out and it's like, okay, we're better than this first paper, right? But the first paper never had a chance to respond to the second paper because it was written after. So your job is to think about, well, what would the authors of paper 1 say about what paper 2 is saying about it, right? Like maybe paper 2 is missing things or they're glossing over a few details, things like that. And so your job as a person that's systemizing knowledge too is not just to repeat what the authors say, but in order to like understand it and put it on kind of a level playing field with all the other results. And sometimes you have to fill in gaps because the paper doesn't cover a particular thing. And so you're there to sort of like try and standardize, especially when you're comparing different papers to each other. Okay. Yeah, so here's another advice is pretend that I've read all the papers that you've cited, okay? So if I don't learn anything from your paper because you're just summarizing what those papers said, then it's not a good project, okay? But if you're telling me your perspective or you're telling me new content, you're using these papers to back it up, then I am learning something new even though I've read all of these other papers as well, okay? So that's, anyways, another metric of it. There's no requirement on how many papers it's not like you have to have 4 papers or something like that. But if you miss something, like if you're like, okay, I'm writing about this subject and there's some major academic paper that everyone in academia knows about on that subject and you somehow miss it, then I might take marks off for that, okay? So I do expect you to try your best to try and find what is relevant in the research areas, okay? Now, I'm not sure if I have a point about this, but before I forget, it doesn't have to be resources from academia. So the one problem with academic papers is they tend to lag behind real life by 2-3 years, okay? So something happens and it takes 2-3 years for people to start writing papers about it. So if you want to do something that's really like a hot topic, a current topic, then there might not be an academic paper. It might be too soon to have it or to have really good quality academic papers about that topic. So can you use blog posts, Medium posts, you know, whatever? Yes, you can, absolutely, okay? So once again, you want to make sure that they're good quality resources. So sometimes, for example, like engineers at Google will write about something, okay? That's as good as an academic paper because it's coming from the developers themselves, all right? So that type of thing is fine. So you want to think about the track record of who's writing it and also the sort of content itself. And like, even if you don't know who the person is that wrote it, but does the content sort of make sense and does it seem like they know what they're talking about and things like that. So don't like there's a lot of bad blog posts and stuff like that on the internet. So it's sort of up to you to try and, it's part of the project, it's part of the exercise of the project is trying to think about whether you're reading things that are right or wrong. And just because it's published in academia doesn't mean that it's right, okay? So there's lots of papers that say completely wrong things that end up getting published, unfortunately. In terms of finding academic papers, a good place to start is Google Scholar. So it's Google, so it's a pretty good search engine. You can put in any topic. It's going to find you some papers. the problem with Google Scholar is it indexes everything, right? So even some bad paper. So let's put in, like, say, later in the course we'll talk about something called Tor. So it's like private web browsing, actually anonymous. So now no one can do Tor as a project because I gave it as an example. But let's say I was doing Tor or whatever. So I see that there's a bunch of papers. Now, if you look, you'll see that, there's different venues that they were published in. So you could try and figure out whether these are good venues or not, so that there are like different ranking systems for venues and things like that. And so, for example, this first one doesn't have the full name, but let's click on it. So this is at Financial Cryptography and Data Security. And then if I want to know, is that a good conference or not, I might go to the core ranking and put in financial cryptography. And it says, it's an A conference, which means it's good. It's very good. It's not the absolute best. A star is the best, but it's the second tier conference or whatever. So this actually happens to be my favorite conference, but it's a very good venue. So you can do things like that. Another gauge is you can look at the number of citations. So if something has 100 citations or more, generally it's a good resource, okay? Academics really, they don't cite papers that they don't like or that they don't think are good quality, okay? If you see something, conversely, that maybe only has, like this one only has 14 citations, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, okay? But it might be an indication, especially if it has 0, 1, 2, 5 or something like that. You might also pay attention to the year. So you might say, well, it's only a 2020 paper, right? So maybe 15 citations is good. But if that was a paper from 1996 and it only had 15 citations, then it's maybe not so good. Google will also try and kind of rank things for you as well. But if you get into really specific search terms, then there's not going to be a lot of papers to choose from. And so that's where you're going to find stuff that isn't good. Okay. When you, this I sort of said, but I'll say it again. When you're looking at the work of others and reporting on it, you want to do it in a critical manner. Okay, so you're not just taking what they say and repeating it. Okay, you're thinking about, is what they're saying actually right? Is it wrong? It doesn't have to be right or wrong. It might be just kind of like a sales pitch, right? Like they're emphasizing the good parts, but there's some bad part that they don't really, or they kind of bury it. And you're like, actually, that piece of that paper that's bad, that's actually a big deal. The authors make it seem like it's not a big deal, or they're like, we'll work on it in future work. But for me, that's a major deal, right? That's the difference between someone actually using this or not using it. And so you might change the emphasis on things as well. So you want to think critically about other papers. If you're completely lost, you can look at major security conferences. So these are the top 4, the A-star conferences for security. So let's say I go to this one and I look, so let's see. So I might look at the papers that were accepted. Let me just get the list of papers themselves. And so I might look at the titles of them and just go through them and think, is there a topic that's at least interesting to me, right? So I might look through, there's probably about 200 papers here. I might look through the titles of all of them, but then only 3 or 4 I might click on. And of the 3 and 4 I click on, I'll read what's called the abstract. So I might think that, actually they have videos, little videos, actually 2-minute video. So you can actually watch a 2-minute video of what it's about. So maybe you watch that, and then maybe one of them you're really interested in or something like that. Then you could go over to Google Scholar and try and find other papers. Also, when you find one paper, you can look at what papers it cites. So go through its bibliography and see what other papers are on the same topic. It will have a related work section where that author is summarizing the work of the other papers as well. So you can get a sense of what they're about. And then you can go to Google Scholar, you can search for the paper that you think is cool, and you can see what are the newer papers that cited it. And so and then you can read what they're saying about the paper that you're interested in, okay? So it's easy, once you have kind of like one paper, it's easy to like kind of, branch out and find 4 or 5, 10 different papers. And then maybe you wander a bit, like you find another paper that's even more interesting than the paper that you started with, okay? And eventually, anyways, you can wander around and settle in on a particular topic. The other thing you can look at is what kind of papers they call for. So all of these have a call for papers, and they usually try and give some list of topics. Now, not every paper fits this list. This is a very non-inclusive list, but it's just sort of like the kind of current areas that people are researching, okay? Now, all of these are too broad. So like, for example, let's say you pick blockchains and distributed ledger. So this is what I work on. You can't write, I don't want a course project on blockchains. That's way, 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 way too broad, okay? You want to narrow it down, right? So you're looking at one specific aspect. And the narrower you can be, generally, the more successful you'll be, because it will give you a better scope, okay? So be really careful about choosing projects that are too broad. A lot of people will do things like, I don't know, not a lot of people now because I discourage them, but they might do operating system security. So they might be like, oh, iOS versus Android, right? Which one's more secure? Like that's way too broad of a topic, right? Like there's so many aspects to an operating system, from the kernel and how it works, so like how storage is and how authentication is used and how permissions are granted, and like any one of those things could be its own topic. You do a whole thing on permissions in Android versus permissions in iOS. Like that's a better topic, but even that might be too broad, right? You might look at, well, what's the usability of permissions in iOS versus Android or whatever, just as an example. So the more narrow you make the project, the easier it will be for you to try and decide what you include and what you don't, and to find papers and things like that. Okay, I'm here to help you. So you can ask me questions. Every class will have a break about 15 minutes in the middle. You can ask me then. You can ask me after class. During office hours, you can ask me, or you can shoot me an email anytime. What I won't do are two things. So one thing is I won't read a draft of your paper. So if you're like, here's my draft, can you read it and give me feedback? I won't do it, just because it would take too much time. If everyone submitted a draft, then I would have another 500 pages to read. What I will do is I'll look at it for 2 minutes, and whatever I can see in those 2 minutes from your headers or figures or whatever jumps out, I can give you feedback on that, but I won't read it in detail. So if you have questions about the project, you have to come with a specific question. It can't just be like, look at it and what do you think kind of thing. But if you have a specific question, I'm here. Choosing the topic is probably like 50% of the project, right? Like once you have a good topic, it's easy to get going and things like that. So spend a lot of time. If you're really stuck and having a hard time, that's actually normal, okay? I want it to be a hard task to choose a good project topic, okay? That's part of the project itself. I'll help you a bit, but I'm not going to, if you're like, oh, I want to do something on malware, I'm not going to be like, okay, go do this project, okay? I really want you to choose a project yourself. Security is really broad. You can look at the security of almost anything, right? So pick something you're genuinely interested in, right? Like, I like soccer. Like, is there some security intersection with soccer? Probably there is, right? If I sit down and think about it hard enough, I can probably come up with a few things, right? Privacy of fitness tracking, or I don't know, the VAR system and whether it's encrypted, I don't know. But so like music, whatever you're into, like you can pick a project on it, and there's probably some aspect of security with it. Okay, so feel free to pick weird topics, esoteric projects. All that stuff is good. It makes it more interesting. If you pick something that's boring, then I get annoyed, and yeah. But I won't hold it against you if it's boring, as long as it's good. What else? And then the other thing is, in terms of what do you have to tell me? You don't have to tell me anything about your project. I don't have to know what your project's about. I don't have to know who you're working with or anything like that. The deadline will come, your project's going to come in, and that can be the very first time that I ever see the project or talk to you. That's acceptable, okay? So you don't have to run the project title by me. Maybe multiple groups end up doing the same project, whatever. Like it's completely anarchy. There's no control over that type of thing, okay? You can change your group at the last minute, whatever. You don't have to run any of that by me, okay? That said, I am here to help. So I want to hear from you about your project and your topics and things like that. But there's nothing necessary that you have to submit other than the actual project report itself, what it's due. References, any format. Security is broad, be creative. There's a marking guideline. You can sort of look through it. Scoping is important. So is it logical what's included and what's not included? in your paper, and then how do you execute the logic of the paper. Can I tell that you understood the topic? That's a big metric, right? It's easy for me to read a paper. I don't really understand it, but it says, oh, we do this, 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 this. I can just say that in my paper too, but I don't actually understand what I'm saying. I'm just sort of parroting what the other paper says. That's really easy to write. You can even write technical papers where you're like, oh, we're looking at machine learning and here's the formula for computing, blah, 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 blah. And you just copy the formula, maybe you change the variable names or whatever, but you don't really understand it, right? So when I'm reading the reports, I want to see your understanding. I want to see, are they explaining it in their own words? Are they explaining it differently than I've seen explained before? Is there any indication that they, that they really internalize, they understand this fully and they're explaining it? As opposed to just, I read a paper, it said these are the 5 properties, so I'm going to say in my paper that these are the 5 properties. So that's part of it. It is a graduate level course, so I want it to be fairly technical. And so what that means is going to look differently depending on what your particular topic is. But you're going to be reading academic papers, so you'll see what a technical level looks like for the papers that you're reading already. You don't have to match that, okay? So your project doesn't have to be publishable at a top 4 security conference. So it doesn't have to be as technical as the papers that you're writing, but there has to be a degree. It should be like sort of halfway to those types of papers. And then the presentation should be, these are usually pretty easy marks to get. Yeah, and basically you're going to show that you put work into it, you organized it well and things like that. You cited things appropriately and things like that. And yeah. Okay, so you can read through these in details, but that's mainly what I want to say about the project. Another thing I'll maybe remind you of when we do assignment 1, your projects and your assignments will be submitted electronically. So there's a system. The system's called EAS. You should have access to it if you're in Gina Cody school. You should have the credentials to log into it. But it's useful if you try to do it, sometime before the day before it's due, just to make sure that you do. So anyway, the website is here. You can try logging in. And if you can't log in, you can ask AITS, the engineering IT, and they have like a ticket system or whatever. So you just submit a ticket and then they'll make sure that you get it. Or you can go to the service desk. So there's a service desk on the 7th floor of the EV building. So you can just go there and get it sorted out. If the deadline comes and you don't have the credentials and you're waiting on them or something like that, you can email it to me. But I will make you submit it through the system when you eventually get your credentials, because the TA is going to mark it and you'll get your marks back through the system itself. So you're going to have to deal with the system one way or another. But if it's an emergency or whatever, it's not working, and you just want to timestamp that it was done on time, then you can certainly just email it to me. And if you're not in Gina Cody, then you're not going to have access to this unless if you explicitly ask for it. So I think no one said that they were in a different department, so that maybe it's not a problem here. Okay. And then there's some instructions, PDF format and how to name your file and things like that. This is more relevant for the project because if you're working in a group, I need to know who all the students are on it. If you're this small detail, you'll forget that I even said this because you're not going to be submitting this for 3 or 4 months. But you just have to submit 1 per group. So if there's a group of 4, you don't have to submit it 4 times. Pick one person to submit it. Doesn't matter who. Just make sure that the report itself has all the students on it and the file name has the student numbers of all the students. Another thing, a group of, if you're 4 people, you all get the same mark. So there's no division of labor. You don't have to tell me who did what. It's just, I mark the project and you all get the same mark. Question?
Yes, I wanted to know how far back papers can be referred to because technology keeps changing.
Right.
We are supposed to refer to the recent ones.
Yeah. So there's no, it depends a lot on the topic. So if you pick I don't know. Okay, let's say you do static analysis, which is like analyzing code or whatever. That's a topic that is pretty dated. There's modern tools that came out in the last 2-3 years. They do a really good job. But people write papers and they keep wanting to write about papers that were published in 2000 or in the 90s because lots have been written about them. So it's easier to understand that work because, it's been 20 years of people writing about it. So that's like the kind of topic where I would prefer you to talk about new things, right? But there's other topics where maybe people just haven't worked on it for 10, 20 years ago, or people thought it was a good idea, then it kind of died. Like an example would be digital cash before Bitcoin came along, right? So like digital cash was like, it had kind of died out. So if you were doing a topic before Bitcoin came out, you would be talking about papers from the 90s and the 80s because there isn't that much that's recent. So it depends a lot on the topic itself. So.
According to the technologies and dependencies used then, there will be differences because nowadays, if you consider the cloud platform also.
Yep. So that's actually that's the role of you to come in, right? So your project could actually be, hey, there's this really cool stuff that people were talking about in the 90s or 2000s or whatever, but it's not as relevant today because the technology landscape has changed. This is how it's changed, and this is what the implications are for it, and then this is how you fix it or change it or what it would mean to situate it in the current context. So that could be a good project. So that's your role. That's part of the systemizing of knowledge is if you have something that's outdated, it's your job to sort of tell me whether that matters or not. It might be like, it doesn't matter, the world hasn't changed, or it matters a lot. Yeah, so that's part of your role as the author itself. Yeah.
Regardless of the group size, right? The report must still remain 8 pages.
Yeah, so 8 pages is just total pages. So what is represented on those 8 pages of text should expand as the group expands, right? So like the amount of work that went into it should increase, but that doesn't necessarily result in needing more pages to talk about it. It's hard to explain, but when you read these academic papers, they also have a page limit. So you might pick up a paper that has 20 authors, and you might pick up a paper that has 2, and they're both 16-page papers. But when you start reading the paper, you can tell, oh, this is why they needed 16 authors, because what they're doing, it touches on so many different elements. Yeah. So don't worry about it. It's just sort of four people working hard on an 8-page document is going to look different than one person. Yeah.
And the presentation will be in person or?
Yeah, no presentation. So it's just the report itself.
Yeah, I think you have a presentation.
Yeah, I might have. I copied this template. I think Actually, I don't know if I said it somewhere, but if you find it where it says presentation, tell me and I'll get rid of it. Yeah. So there's no presentation. It's just the written report itself.
Is the presentation that you do in your report, how you present your ideas?
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. So if it was in the tips, yeah, that's right. So presentation there, I meant, that I understand. Let me show you.
You mentioned about scope execution.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so that's a badly worded thing. Yeah, what I mean is the presentation of your idea, exactly what she said. The presentation of your idea in the paper itself. So there's no actual presentation. That's different than most courses. So a lot of your other courses, almost all of them have a course presentation and they have a course project. And usually the last 2-3 days of classes is just presentations.
And in the case we work in a group, no need to specify the task of each member?
Yeah, so no, I don't need any of that. So yeah, everyone's going to get the same mark and that's that. Okay, other questions about any of this stuff? Anything before we actually start the course itself? Yeah. Sure. So the assignments are written assignments. I'll release them closer to when they're due because first I have to decide the topic of the assignment itself, and then secondly, I usually will release it after I cover the material that you need to understand the assignment itself. So last year, for example, we looked at vaccine passports, and so it's sort of like, okay, we talked about this thing in class called STRIDE, so use STRIDE to evaluate a couple of different ways of doing a vaccine passport. We talked about this thing called evaluation frameworks, start filling out what an evaluation framework would look like for it. So I want these many columns, these many rows. So this assignment doesn't make much sense to you because we haven't covered the material itself, but in the end, it's a written report. It's like 2-3 pages long in a PDF. There's no programming or coding or anything like that. And yeah, and then assignment 2 is similar. It's just sort of like there's this methodology we learned about in class. Here's another tool. Take what we learned in class and apply it to this new tool, and then go through it. And then it's you're just following the methodology. So the methodology says you have to come up with these things, so you're coming up with these things. Yeah, and yeah, you can also. Anyways, don't concern yourself much with the assignments. Most students don't find the assignments like a big time-consuming or a very difficult project. They help reinforce what you learn, but they're quite reasonable. You can also, so my previous websites, when they're on Moodle, you can't see them because Moodle doesn't let you. But before I used Moodle, a lot of times I used just the web itself. And so some of these old websites you can still access. And so you can definitely look at what the assignments look like from past years if you're really concerned about it. But yeah. So assignment 1 I'll release soon, like within a week or two. I'll give you at least 2 weeks to work on it from when I release it. And so I'll talk about it at least 2 weeks before it's due in class. And, yeah.
Everyone has the same question.
Yeah, so the assignments, they're all individual, so you have to do them individually, but everyone's doing the same assignment. So they all have the same example. And they're open-ended enough that everyone comes up with something different. So it's not like there's one, these aren't the kinds of assignments where there's one right answer. It's like, it's about your creativity, so you have to come up with 10 security things to consider when you're considering this topic, and different people will pick different things. Yeah.
The course material and everything, I cannot see it on the Moodle page.
Yeah, what does it look like?
Yeah, it says that you cannot enroll yourself in this course.
So it might be that you're not on the Moodle itself.
It's showing winter 2022 and winter 2023. That is the term is showing. It's not fall 2022.
You can see what's.
Okay, sure. Actually, just explain it to me again. What?
When like I tried to search in the model, so
Yeah.
there are 2 courses coming out. One of them is 2224, but it's showing maybe winter 2023, the term. So it's stating that I cannot access, be enrolled in this course.
I'll show you.
Cannot access it.
Okay. So it's possible because I'm teaching the course in the winter, I might have set it up on the wrong.
That's my Moodle page, and
Okay.
that's the.
I see. And can I just go back to your? Where's all your courses?
Yeah, they're. These are supposed to be here. You cannot enroll yourself, and these are all my courses.
Yeah, do you have 6150 somewhere?
Nope. I accessed your course through the website.
Yeah, got it.
See, they're all my courses here, but I cannot access 615.
Okay. I'll figure it out. But thank you. You dropped something. All right. So apparently the Moodle's maybe not working. The one possibility is because the names are really weird. Like I sort of guessed that this is this term, but I might have accidentally set it up for because I'm teaching this course in the winter as well. So I might have put it in the winter spot instead of the fall spot. So the good news is it's just one click. If I find the right folder, I can just import it. And so, anyways, after class, I'll spend some time looking at it. So the Moodle should be up by tomorrow. And if it's not, you can email me. Let me just. Okay. What I'll do is actually we'll take a break in a second, and I'll spend 15 minutes trying to look into it. But before we do that, is there any other questions? Because when we come back from the break, we'll jump into the course itself. So, are there any other questions about anything? Yeah.
If we understand the course material very well, can we solve the assignment
Yes, yes. So the course material will help you do the assignment, and the assignments will be specific to one section of the course material. So it's not a course that like kind of builds over time. Like every lecture builds on the lecture before. It's more like a selection of topics. So we're going to look at one topic, and then we're going to look at something completely different. And to understand the second topic, it doesn't matter if you understand the first topic or not. And so the course projects are going to be like that. They'll be tied to one of the specific topics. And so you only actually have to understand that one topic. You don't have to understand the topics before or after it. But yeah, like I say, the assignments, yeah, no students haven't had a problem in the past with the assignments. They just sort of do them and they come in and usually the marks are pretty high for the assignments. Okay, other questions? All right, so let's come back at 5 after 4, and so take 15 minutes, and I'll in the meantime look at this Moodle issue. And if you have any questions for me, I'm here.